Existential fear. One of the more common questions I get revolves around what to do when you start to feel fear, existential fear, or even existential terror. This could be called the dark night of the soul. So the first thing that's important to understand about this is that in this process, the process of awakening and realization, you will at some point come in contact with this kind of fear. There's no avoiding it. It's advisable from the beginning to just accept this truth, that fear is an emotion, and at some point you're going to come in contact with it. In my book, one of the early tenets I lay out is be prepared to be uncomfortable. This doesn't mean that this process is going to be torture or that you're going to have to sustain constant fear, uncomfortable experiences, unworthiness, shame, etc. It just means that if you have a general avoidance tone toward these types of experiences, you're going to add unnecessary struggle to this process. A way of approaching spirituality that assumes that the point of this process is to not feel certain emotions, to not feel uncomfortable, to feel blissful and peaceful all the time or happy all the time. This is a mistake. That's not what this process is about. This process is about clear seeing. It's about experiencing reality without filters. It's about living unencumbered by ignorance, self-interest, resistance to life, resistance to emotions, resistance to our immediate experience of being alive. So this tenet of being willing to feel uncomfortable when that occurs will serve you well. You don't have to be on guard for it. You don't have to go dig for uncomfortable emotions and experiences. Just be willing to allow them to move through your experience when they naturally arise. Specific to fear and existential fear, the root cause of this is that our identity is entangled in thought and conceptual structures, in ego structures. And as those ego structures naturally dissolve, as we disentangle our identity from beliefs, habit patterns, and conditioning, there will be a certain disorientation that happens on occasion. And when we're not used to this type of disorientation that's experienced when the identity starts to shift, then we might have a fear response. Our body-mind might perceive this as an existential threat, especially the first few times we come in contact with this disentanglement process. So the interpretation of fear is simply because our body-mind interprets disentangling of identity from conceptual structures as a threat to its own existence, because we've identified with concepts, beliefs, memories, stories, narratives. So then this fear is a natural part of the process. It's unavoidable, and it's perfectly okay. So the question naturally arises, what to do when you experience this? Well, first and foremost, just slow down. Just give yourself some time, some space to process the experience. Let yourself feel what it is that's moving through the body and the mind. Notice the thoughts. Notice the interpretations. Then notice the sensations in the body. Notice how they move together, and just be willing to sit with this. As simple as this sounds, at first it's quite challenging. You'll feel an intense restlessness or a wanting to distract, to go into narratives. But as you remind yourself that this is a natural process, and it's okay to feel whatever's happening in this moment, that tendency to want to run from this experience through distraction or through mental escape will calm down. Along with this willingness to just experience what is happening in the mind and in the body, there naturally arises an approach that is quite simple, and that is overt acceptance. This means reflecting on what you're feeling, thinking, perceiving, and then giving yourself permission to feel, think, and perceive exactly what's here. This can be spoken out loud, like, I give myself permission to feel intense experiences, to feel fear. I give myself permission to feel the body shake, to feel the heartbeat fast. I give myself permission to notice thoughts about death or loss of control. It's okay, they can be here. The thoughts can be here. The sensations can be here. The physiologic response can be here. I give it permission to be here. This is actually very powerful. It can be quite counterintuitive, because if we're still identified with those thoughts, we might actually believe that what we really want is not to be in this situation, that we want to do anything we can to escape it. But again, if we recognize that's a thought, that's an interpretation, and there's something here that's aware of that thought. There's something here that's not reacting to that thought. There's a little bit of space, a little gap. That gives us an opportunity to alter our default reaction. Instead of doing everything we can to run away from this experience, we can introduce some acceptance, even if it's experimental. Like, I don't really know what will happen if I just stay in this space, because I usually run from it, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to accept what's happening. I'm willing to accept the sensations, the thoughts, the tendency to move from the sensations to the thoughts. I can accept that. So even as an experiment, this can be valuable practice. The next strategy is to remind yourself that this, like every experience, is temporary, transient. The body cannot sustain the physiologic fear response forever. In fact, if you just stay with it, the heartbeat, the clamminess, even the jitteriness that might come along with this experience, you might be surprised that it calms down rather quickly. What drags experiences like this out isn't the physiologic experience, it's the thought experience. It's the belief in the thoughts about it, the fears that it will never end. The mind is very good in these situations at claiming territory that it does not inhabit, like past and future. Telling you that if you don't continue to listen to the thoughts, you'll be stuck like this forever. When in truth, if you just let your attention move to the physical sensations, it's often quite short-lived. But regardless of how long it lasts in this instance, you can remind yourself that all emotions, all experiences, all sensations, all thoughts are transient. Everything comes and goes. Everything's always in flux. This is the natural way. So part 2 of that recognition of transience is, in the same way that you accepted the presence of these emotions and experiences and thoughts, you can accept the fact that they're going to leave as well. Just like pleasurable experiences come and go, uncomfortable experiences come and go. So give these experiences permission to be here, and also give them permission to subside when it feels natural. An additional strategy is to ask yourself, what is it I'm afraid of specifically? If you really unpack that, you might be surprised what you find. If you ask the question and you don't have an immediate answer, be patient. Sometimes it takes a little time But if you're persistent in asking and open to the answer, sooner or later it will come. Writing this down can help as well. Sometimes the fears are things like death, loss of control, going insane. But other times, they're rather simple fears, rather mundane fears. But the unnoticed aspect of the fears is what keeps them charged. Often when we just look closely enough, we open the door to see what we're actually afraid of. Things calm down quite a bit. So it can be helpful to inquire into what is the source of the fear. What is it you're afraid of? And once that's uncovered, you don't need to do anything with it. You don't need to throw it out. Just accept it. Accept that that's normal. Because it is. It's human. And the last strategy I want to offer in situations where we're feeling this existential fear is, if it feels relevant and if you have access, put yourself in a situation that's generally soothing to you. But don't neglect the other strategies we discussed. So if that's to take some time away to spend time in nature, or to do some art, or to spend time around animals, or to meditate, then by all means, give yourself that time. Give yourself that gift.